Today, we will travel on a wonderful journey throughout American history. We'll start off with the Monroe Doctrine, where we travel to the time 1823.
Many Latin American countries were starting to become independent from Spain.
Come back!
The U.S. didn't want any European power to take over Spain's colonies, so President Monroe created a policy called the Monroe Doctrine. The Monroe Doctrine stated that if any European countries tried to colonize our land or mess with the states in Americas, the U.S. would view it as aggression and the U.S. would interfere.
You're wrong. No, you're wrong. No, you're wrong. No, you're wrong.
The Monroe Doctrine was important because it warned Europe not to colonize on or interfere with the Americas and stopped any potential colonizations or interferences. And now we travel to the time 1814, the time of the Indian Removal Act.
Wow, look at all this land. I'm so glad we decided to settle down south. This land is perfect for growing cotton. I'm sure glad our families decided to settle down south. We'll make fortunes off this fine, unoccupied land.
But in fact, the land was occupied. Did you hear that, Joe? I sure did. I wonder what it is.
Hombre, yo, boom, hombre.
The lower South was in fact home to the Cherokee, Creek, Choctaw, Chickasaw, and Seminole tribes. Aw, shucks, John. Looks like we might not be able to settle here after all with all these Indians taking up space. Aw, shucks, John. Looks like we might not be able to settle here after all with all these Indians taking up space. Not if we can't convince the federal government that these Indians need to go. The U.S. needs to gain control of the Indian Territory, Joe. They're standing in the way of progress, Joe. Andrew Jackson was very supportive of the idea to remove the Indians. In 1814, him and the U.S. military forces defeated part of the Creek Nation, where the U.S. got 22 million acres of land in Georgia and Alabama. Then in 1818, Jackson's troops invaded Spanish Florida and got even more land.
Shoot them down, boys.
Andrew Jackson was also able to negotiate 9 out of the 11 treaties, which moved some Indians out of the South in exchange for lands in the West during 1814 to 1824. The Indians agreed to the treaties because they wanted to please the government and maybe get their land back. And they wanted to get away from white harassment. Through the treaties, the U.S. acquired a lot of
Alabama, Florida, Georgia, Tennessee, Mississippi, Kentucky, and North Carolina.
Over time, Indian nations tried everything they could not to be driven out. They attempted at coexisting with the white men, ceding parts of their land to the U.S. and hoping they could keep at least part of their territory and refusing to leave their land. But nothing worked. Jackson created a new legislation called the Indian Removal Act, which gave the president power to negotiate with the Indians about moving west or staying and becoming citizens. If they didn't cooperate, Jackson forced them to leave. The Indians put up a good fight, but eventually nearly all the Indians had been relocated. The Cherokee were tricked into leaving, and 7,000 U.S. troops forced the Cherokee to march west. They weren't allowed to get their belongings, and whites looted their homes. Thus began the Trail of Tears. In which 4,000 Cherokee people died
Of cold, hunger, and disease.
By 1837, more than 46,000 Indians, all parts of the Cherokee, Creek, Choctaw, Chickasaw, and Seminole tribes had been relocated. 25 million acres were opened up to the U.S. And now we travel to around 1821, the time of the Texas Revolution. Are you recording?
Yes.
You never We are now independent from Spain. We can run things ourselves now. But since Mexico wasn't used to governing themselves, people who were stronger and more ambitious took power.
We will only have enchiladas on Sundays.
What?
Meanwhile, people from the U.S. were starting to settle in Texas. They wanted to run things their own way, breaking the laws of Mexico. We will eat enchiladas on Tuesdays too!
Yay!
The Texas Americans didn't like sharing land with Indians. They even bragged about killing Indians. Even after the Mexican leaders said they didn't want American settlers on their land anymore, Americans settled in Mexican territory illegally.
This feels backward.
The Mexican people started getting angry. A leader called Santa Anna marched to Texas with 3,000 men. Some Americans left while some stayed to fight. The Americans and the Mexicans fought the Alamo, where the Americans were all slaughtered except 3 women and 3 children. However, after people in the U.S. heard of what happened, they fought back. After some complication, Texas was finally made our 28th state in December of 1845.
Go.
And now, we travel to the time 1843, which was the beginning of a long journey for the pioneers traveling on the Oregon Trail.
Oh no, Joe! Somebody over there just died! Who? A baby over there just got run over. It sure is hard traveling this Oregon Trail. So many people have already died of poor sanitation, cholera, and accidental gunshots.
In all, about 10% of pioneers died on the trail.
A heck of a lot of people are going on the Oregon Trail. We aren't the only people who are looking for a better life in the West with free land and mining opportunities. Hopefully it's worth it, because I have a hunch that this is going to take a mighty long time.
In fact, the journey on foot took 4 to 6 months. The trail went from Independence, Missouri, up to Oregon City, several stops along the way.
There are so many hardships on this trail. We have to walk, we have to cross rivers, the weather is bad, and people keep getting running over by wagon wheels. Hopefully we'll get there okay.
And now, we travel to the time when the people of the U.S. started thinking about expanding further west.
Joe, have you heard of the U.S.'s supposed destiny yet? Why, yes, I have. Well, act like you haven't, because I'm supposed to explain it. The people of the U.S. wanting more land have decided that it's their fate to expand towards the Pacific, that it's God's plan. They call it manifest destiny. I already knew that, John. Now, some Americans were reluctant to move. They knew that the Indians lived in the West, and they thought that it was wrong to take over their lands. Nevertheless, many people moved west as an effect of manifest destiny. Wow.
And now, we travel to the time 1846, when the Mexican War was beginning. The events leading up to the war started with Texas getting taken from Mexico.
It makes me very angry that Mexico has forced us all off their California territory. They even made a law that immigration isn't allowed there anymore.
After Texas was annexed, Mexico cut off its diplomatic connections with the U.S. and forced American settlers off California territory, making it a law that they couldn't settle there. Mexico and the U.S. were also disagreeing about the border between Texas and Mexico.
And can you believe what they've been saying about the border? What have they been saying? Mexico thinks the border is the Nueces River, but we say it's the Rio Grande. There's a whole lot of land between the 2 rivers, so I think we may go to war.
In fact, they did. In June of 1845, President Polk ordered General Taylor to take U.S. troops into the area of the border dispute, and meanwhile, he sent John Slidell to Mexico City to negotiate. However, the Mexican officials refused to talk to him. A month after Taylor and his troops had arrived by the border, Mexico told them to leave or they would be attacked. The U.S. troops didn't leave, so the Mexicans attacked. Many of the U.S. soldiers died, many were captured, and some were injured. After that, war was declared on Mexico.
We sure did get a lot of land out of that Mexican war. You bet we did. California, Nevada, Arizona, Utah, Western Colorado, and New Mexico are all part of the USA now.
And now we travel to the year 1848, when gold was discovered in California.
Hey Joe, guess what? Was gold found in the Sierra Nevada mountains, and men are planning on traveling there by wagon train or by sea to mine for gold and get rich? How'd you know? I read the paper. I think we should head west. We could get rich overnight. But I heard there aren't any women going there. That's a big problem. Women just play such important parts in life, society, and the well-being of the world. Well, let's go anyway. We can find gold and use the money to buy whatever our wives want. Good plan! The men that traveled west to mine for gold in 1849 were called the 49ers. Some of them found lots of gold, but some weren't lucky and ended up in debt. Mining towns were set up where miners could buy supplies, clothing, beer, and other necessities. So many people moved to California, hoping to strike it rich that it was made a state in 1850. Thanks for watching.